Alrighty, and good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to all of those on the West Coast. We are happy for you all to be joining us today as we go through the optimizing waste efficiency across multiple locations, featured here with Rubicon. So could we please go to the next slide? All right, and first and foremost, just so you know who's talking before we get into further introductions, my name is Tom Owston, and I work with Rubicon as the VP of Account Management. So I oversee all of our national accounts, and my primary focus is retention, satisfaction, and growth of our clients, and really pushing the needle on optimization. So I started originally at Rubicon in 2015. But my journey within waste and recycling started much longer before that, in 2009, as a customer service representative for a compactor company. And during that time, I really fell in love with the industry and the way the industry could be changed through optimization and efficiency and data. So although I'd spent some time working in the software as a service industry, I felt always drawn to come back to this space because outside of, trash telling us what we're throwing away, I believe it tells us much more about our society and where our society is headed. I think there's just so much information in waste and recycling. And I'm very excited to walk you through the rest of the presentation here today. And I will first mention that we're going to make this interactive towards the end here with some Q&A. So in the chat, if you have questions, I know there's a lot of folks who are joining us from across the country. If you're out there in the audience and you want to add questions, we'll go through it at the end, and we'll be sure to address all of those. But a little bit about Rubicon before I pass it off to our esteemed panelists here to talk about their businesses. But Rubicon is a software company on a mission to end waste. And we believe that waste of all its kind can be eliminated through technology and through an open mind of approaching problems. And in turn, we can help businesses be more sustainable enterprises and turn neighborhoods into greener and smarter places to live and work. We partner with independent haulers across the globe and vendors, in all 50 states and 22 countries, to develop a platform that people can really monitor and their waste collection and look for ways to optimize. We have almost 5 million unique service locations, which gives us just a ton of data to go through and make decisions. So I don't want to make this a Rubicon commercial, so I'm going to go to the next slide and just mention that we are a certified B Corp. And being a B Corp, this is the type of certification for companies like Patagonia, where we try to be the companies that we want to work with. We want to be the change in the world. And we believe that starts with our employees and our business. So we go through a rigorous certification to be a B Corp, to align business with the purpose of being a force for good. We cover 100% of our employee benefits. And we have a remarkable amount of groups to kind of continually drive entrepreneurship, as well as doing the right thing is a big mentality here. But like I said, we wouldn't be anything without the companies that we work with. And today we have two great companies. First, along far along in the journey of their sustainability, I would say, is Cox Enterprises. And we have Meredith Lindvall, who is the Director of Waste and Recycling for Cox Enterprises. And later on, Parker Lacy will be mentioning his company, Trilogy, who is kind of beginning their journey on the waste and recycling optimization standpoint. So I think we have Meredith now will take us through a few slides, tell us about where they are, and then we'll hear from Parker, who's at the early stage of his journey around optimization and diversion. So Meredith, please tell us a little bit here about Cox.
Happy to. Thanks so much for the introduction, Tom. And I wanted to set the stage a little bit about who Cox is, so that when we start talking about Cox's zero waste journey, you'll have a better context about all of the different types of businesses that we are trying to solve zero waste at. So a little bit about us. We are actually still a private family-owned business, fourth generation. And unless you live in a Cox market, you might not know that we are also, we own Cox Communications. So we are the largest private U.S. cable television and broadband internet provider. We are also the parent company of something called Cox Automotive. So you might not know about that brand, but you might know about some of our other brands within that. So Auto Trader and Kelley Blue Book. You know, 3 out of every 4 automotive transactions in the United States actually come through a Cox Automotive brand. So you might not have heard of us, but you are familiar with our brands that are out there. We have about 50,000 employees, and we operate in 15 countries, and we're about $20 billion in revenue. But what's really important for us to take away here is that we are very committed to sustainability. So a little bit different than a manufacturer, Cox is really a service-based industry. So our interpretation of how we work on our aggressive goals to be zero waste to landfill by 2024 and carbon and water neutral by 2034 is a lot different as we think about how can we make this impact in a service-based business. And so we've invested more than $1 billion since 2007 in sustainability and clean technologies, and we are actively looking to grow those verticals in the Cox portfolio. Next slide.
Wow.
So we've got a lot going on, and that'll make zero waste make a little bit more sense, is that we've got really specific playbooks by businesses. But I wanted to give more flavor around how sustainability is really part of the way that Cox does business. So we established our Cox Conserves mission and department. So that's really our sustainability brand in 2007. And so that is the thread, that is the sustainability lifeblood that breathes throughout the Cox businesses. And that's what Cox employees live, act, and deploy every day across Cox. And so quick snapshot, just in 2018, Cox offset over 9,000 tons of carbon, saved 22.5 million gallons of water, and then closest to my heart and my team, reduced waste that we sent to landfill by almost 40,000 tons in just 1 year. Next slide. So what are we actually talking about here when we talk about zero waste at Cox? So thinking about how does an enterprise go zero waste? On a good day, I manage somewhere around 350 locations in 47 states. So that's a lot to keep track of, and partnering with Rubicon to manage all of those. But the nitty gritty of how Cox is tackling zero waste by 2024 is the way we define it is this. We want to reduce as much as we can within our 4 walls. We want to eliminate, we want to reduce, reuse, recycle everything we can within the Cox footprint. And then that small remaining piece that is left, we want to make that up through meaningful offsets and partnerships in the communities where we live, work, and serve, and in materials that are pertinent to Cox. So we really want to be a catalyst for not only zero waste within our 4 walls, but really a catalyst for zero waste in all communities. So that is where we are looking as we get closer to this goal, is turning this gaze of what we've learned, because again, we're a service-based business. So what we're solving is actually a lot more similar to maybe what someone or a community is trying to solve at their home or at a municipal level. So really taking what we've learned, and I'll share on the next slide where we've been, but helping others come along on this journey. We really believe that we can't solve these problems, especially zero waste, just by ourselves. We've really got to partner and be a part of that change. So a little bit about our journey. I am really proud to share that we kicked off our zero waste to landfill goal in 2013. We didn't even know what our diversion rate, it's not, zero waste was not even part of our vernacular. We had been working on carbon since 2007, but we had never looked at zero waste. So I'm really proud to share that in just a few short years, we started our journey at only a 9% diversion rate, and really exponential growth on that progress to goal every year. So we started at 9%, and I'm really proud to share that we closed out 2020 with a 76% diversion rate. And again, you'll see that flavor of what that looks like. It's about 40,000 tons diverted last year alone, and it's over 250,000 tons from just when we started this journey. And I also want to toot our horn that we do have 46 zero waste to landfill locations, and we are actively looking to make more progress towards that goal. And my big audacious goal for this year is I've got to hit an 80% diversion rate across this entire portfolio of companies. So that is our journey in a nutshell, and we're really excited to talk about the nuts and bolts of how we've had this meteoric rise.
Yeah, meteoric is a great way to put it, Meredith. It's been great to see Cox be a platform for educating others on zero waste as well. And you're in a powerful position to just make impact to society. So now Parker Lacy, VP of Facilities for Trilogy in Kentucky, which is a state near and dear to Rubicon's heart. Please tell us a bit about you on the front end of this journey as you go through optimization and diversion strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, Tom, really appreciate you guys including me in this panel. Absolutely thrilled to talk about Trilogy and what we're doing in this space. And quite frankly, I think if we could have done this, the phasing a little differently next time, so that I could go before Meredith, because we're gonna clearly be a little bit different. They've got, yeah, it's an extremely tough act to follow. You know, we're at that 9%. You know, I've been with Trilogy for about a year and a half. Trilogy is a senior care provider here in the Midwest. And our special sauce that we really, truly believe in, and we believe that it's a huge piece of our factor, is we truly believe in investing in our employees and taking care of our employees, and then our employees will take care of our residents. And we believe that that's been the foundation of our success, going from one campus to 120 over the past 20 years. In that, you know, we started to look in the midst of COVID last year. We really started to challenge some things that had been kind of status quo, to say, how can we expand that stewardship of our employees and taking care of our employees? And we really started to look at our communities and understand what can we do to really help those communities out where our employees are living. They're living with their families and they're going home to, and we really want to make sure that we're doing everything right by them in those areas. And so we started to work on our environmental programs, and I was happy that the timing worked out, that I was able to be here to help with that. One of our biggest first steps was just partnering with Rubicon and really getting some of the fundamental blocking and tackling in place so that we could start to work on some of the things that we'll talk about in some of these questions in here just a minute. But for those out there that haven't started their sustainability program or haven't looked at something like this, you know, to Meredith's story, it seems like it takes forever, and it seems like there's such a large hill to climb, but you know, there's really no other way than just starting in 1 year and baselining yourself, and then saying, you know, that 80% target is something to definitely work for. And we're right there at that first year that Cox took on this initiative. And so we're happy to start now and see where this road takes us.
Great. So now we're at the section where we're going to get into the questions here. And this will be fluid. I would love you to elaborate on any idea you have that comes as we're chatting through this. I'm thinking in my head of trying to replicate a fireside chat if we were actually physically somewhere where we'd be talking about this and having a conversation versus a virtual world that we're now in. I think I'd kick that off by just defining optimization, because we talk a lot about optimization, the word. So I was like, let me just Google, what does optimization actually mean? Like, how does Oxford define optimization? So it's the action of making the best or most effective use of a situation or a resource. And I would ask you all, like, where in your career did you, sort of thinking about what optimization means, when you were in this waste and recycling world, at what moment did you have that aha moment that, wow, I can make a real impact on this, and I could truly optimize this organization? What was that moment that kind of or story that kept you going back for more and made you realize just how big of an issue this is? So Parker, we'll go first with you this time, as that moment may have happened just recently, having started in the last year and a half.
Absolutely. I think, for me on a personal level, it really started when, taking on an environmental care and facility management for healthcare during COVID. You start to look and say, where can we add value? And, COVID for all businesses was really what was tough. And for us to be able to come to the table as a contributor to say, here's an opportunity that we can right size this, not just from a cost standpoint, but also from a functionality standpoint, and to be a contributor, a big contributor at the table when we're all trying to figure out how do we solve this COVID, and to be able to help out for that. And that for me was a big aha moment that, we can come to the table with some good solutions to help out the organization and the team as a whole.
That's a great motivator. I would say for me, it was really getting a waste characterization and look at all of this stuff that is readily recyclable that we are just throwing away. So one of the first steps that we took, and really what motivated me, is just having that data, and you can then really take clear action and set a plan. And Cox is really committed to not only going green, but saving green. And so being armed with that information, I'll tell one story about us. Is our first waste characterization at one of our corporate offices, we found out that 36% of what we were throwing in the trash was regular paper. So when you you have that information, it really catches your attention, and you can start to really make plans towards, this is what my impact is going to be, and this is what's going to drive my employees, but also start looking at, here's how I'm going to be able to do those optimizations. And so the optimizations are not only going to help the company's bottom line, but also help us in my work. This is how I'm going to take my first steps towards this really terrifying goal, is being armed with this information.
And Meredith, I think you bring up a great point around the waste characterization, as well as just getting out there and in the field. That's so critical, and particularly now, post-COVID, as we're getting back out there, we've sort of been behind the keyboard and behind our screens for a while. I think it is so important to just go out and see what truly is going on. A quick story for one of my aha moments where I thought of the impact technology could have was on a hot August day in 2015 at a Carmike Cinemas, which is getting very nostalgic as Carmike has since been acquired. But to those who grew up in rural areas, you'll know the Carmike was a very popular place. And I was meeting with a site manager who they were insisting across the board that they needed to have their pickups be a certain time per week, or a certain amount per week. And we found out that they were so worried about, because when the compactor was full and if they couldn't get a pickup to happen and they waited too long, it would actually start smelling, and like you would be in the theater and you could smell the compactor. So we realized that there was such a fear of managing for when they're really, really busy, that they were managing the pickups based on the highest level of their volume. So because it was like they were so worried about overflow that they just over collected everywhere. That's where we realized, like, if we could just time these, look at some frequency of timing and some trends over time on tonnage, we could actually help you stay ahead of that. And then you're not managing to the exception, you're managing to the norm. So we're able to keep dumpsters from being smelly and compactors from being smelly without just over collecting and paying for these unnecessary trips, these unnecessary trucks driving around. Because that truly is one of the ways to have the biggest environmental impact, is to do less pickups, less damage on the roads, less fuel being burned. So that was just one of my little stories that I wanted to add in there. But it does call to attention, just getting out there, get in the field, see this stuff in person. So along that question, Meredith, obviously in 2013, you came in and then launched the Zero Waste. How do you position optimization and right sizing within your company? I mean, it sounds like everyone is very receptive to the program, but how did you sort of evangelize that, or how do you describe it to, without getting too wasty, as we say? I can quickly start using words only about known in the waste industry. How do you communicate it internally?
Sure. So again, actually being armed with that waste characterization, with that data of what we throw away, really helps explain the why to people. So, you know, we have a zero waste to landfill goal. What does that mean? But I was able to come to them and say, what I didn't share about with you with the rest of that waste characterization is that 56% of what we were throwing away was regular recycling. So now, armed with that information, I was able to go out and have thousands of conversations with folks that are actually in the field and say, you know what, let's take a look. About 50% of what you're putting in this dumpster can readily go in another dumpster. So actually the way that we approach this, Tom, is doing two things at once. Not only doing reducing the trash level, but using that optimization to add recycling. So what we would do is say, this trash dumpster, it's full, right? You talking to the facilities person, it's full. About 50% of this is recyclable. Will you work with me and agree? So in a stepwise fashion, we would usually baby step and say, if you have 5 days a week of service, of trash pickups, if you will work with me and say, our target is that we want to get you down to 2 of those, right? Because now we're saying 50% isn't actually trash. Let's step this down. We'll baby step you down to, would you agree to 4 days a week? And here's what those savings are going to be. And we would actually lay it out. Option 1, the least amount of savings, and all the way to here's what we really want to do. But at the same time, we're going to add a recycling dumpster to go with that. So really that allowed us to not only do optimizations, but also make progress on our zero waste to landfill goal, is pairing those together. But we still keep a very sharp eye out on any of our locations that have a service level that is not within the norm. So I would encourage folks to start looking at what is normal for this type of business on a service perspective. Again, very weird at Cox because we have so many different types of businesses, but we have all of that information to say, this is really what we think is the optimal service level for a call center, or this is what we think is the optimal service level for an office, but really being sure that we pair that with the savings, but also connecting that back to Cox Conserve's aggressive goal. And that really got a lot of buy-in from our employees. And the other piece that we paired with that, just so that they could not only drive savings, for us, it's also a process piece. We own auto auctions, so there's cars zooming around all the time. And so finding out what might be that other thing that this facilities person needs to happen besides savings. And so one of the pitches, for example, was, I can promise you that there will be fewer trash trucks coming on the lot on a day that you're having a sale. So let's talk through that. So finding some other business value for them as well. And what's really helped them, and it might be different for other companies, but is being sure that Cox employees know for every 1 ton of trash that we generate, we have to find 9 tons of recycling if we want to be zero waste. So we have a packet actually when we propose a waste optimization that is really tailored to the Cox experience, but has this sort of toll gates of, here's a baby step you could take, here's the benefits, and at each one of those service levels tells them the financial benefit, the service benefit, and then the sustainability benefit.
Wow, that's great. And the approach to rolling it out that you said is like, it's let's crawl, walk, run. Like you didn't turn on a facility and say, hey, guess what? No more trash. You secured early wins, and then you get the people in the field to realize, oh, this works, and then you rolled it out from there. So That's great insight for people who are on the front end of this. They can learn from your steps along the way.
And I would add, if I could,
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you can convince one location to do that, to get an early win, like Tom said, they can help evangelize to their peers. So if there are similar markets or similar locations to them, if you can gain buy-in from one location to take that journey with you, they can help you sell that. Like you said, it's not all or nothing. Here's how we did it. Here's the baby step optimizations that we took with no impact to business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now on from Parker's standpoint, being that there wasn't a consolidated program before you started at Trilogy, how did you socialize this internally at Trilogy, even just to bring the program together instead of managing it on the sites? Like, how did you position an optimization goal or diversion? How did you get that going off the ground?
Yeah, so I think, there's a lot of similarities that I'm going to talk about, but it's not nearly as mature as what Meredith talked about, right? So the way we started our optimization process was we had a few campuses, right? Like the first question is do they have the data, right? Do they have a way to access the data that's clean, consumable, and digestible that site can talk about? And Meredith talked about some really great things, right, that are very mature in the process. The cost, how much you're diverting. For us, really, it's about, hey, how many times can you change your pickup schedule? Can you flex that schedule? And you get some buy-in at the site level through quite frankly, with Rubicon, and the dashboard's fantastic, right? And so we just got a lot of really positive feedback from our plant operations teams at the campuses. Hey, I need something changed. I need an extra pickup. I need a haul away dumpster. Whatever the case was, they could get into that dashboard and make some quick changes. And so that was an easy way for us to get all of our facility management team at the campuses to buy in and start using that dashboard. Then from there, to exactly what Meredith talked about, we start to baseline from there to say, all right, hey, let's pull out some of the metrics that we think are most impactful to the waste generation process. And obviously, we're at a much more macro level. And so we look at a couple of things, right? We look at our occupancy, we look at our employee footprints, and we look at our square footage, and we start to say, hey, let's look at the data on what's happening at those sites and what those three create. And then we can start to kind of extrapolate that for others. And that's easy for us now. And as we identify sites that are overpicked, they have got too much pickup, right? They may be hauling off a quarter filled dumpster. And then to Meredith, we have a lot to mature into to get to where they're talking about. But I think that it's really critical that, those first steps, you follow very similar processes. You find that buy-in, you find something that's impactful, you find something that's emotional and sticky for the campus or for that facility, and you get that buy-in. And they start to use it just a little bit, and even just one. And I think quite frankly, I think our biggest salesman was one of the campuses that had been using the dashboard, and we just got him on a phone call with 120 other campuses, and we just had him tell his story about how he flexed up and flexed down through a click of a button, as opposed to waiting on hold for hours at a time to get something changed, or calling waste man, calling a vendor and then getting on hold and sending, that story alone was worth way more than my arm twisting could ever do. And so I think that, you just start very basic and find that buy-in, and then you start to lay in some data on top of that. And then you just add a little bit more buy-in for wherever that data is taking you, and you just continue that process. And to Mira's point, I think having a North Star where you're trying to go is really critical. And for us, we've already made that commitment. Hey, we're going to try to get to 15% recycling just this year. We started at about 4. We're already up to 7. So we're going to make that incremental gain throughout the year. But I think having that's really critical in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a good point. I know you and I have talked about in the past, where some people, they have that familiarity with wanting to, call in to request a service or service change, or they want to email it in. But if you look at like the way the industry from a customer service standpoint is headed, like airlines, you know, your cable bill, everything is moved towards this, you know, digitization of communication for self-service platforms. So if you had to change your flight on Delta, you probably go on the app and you change it through the app versus, you know, calling and speaking to someone. And I think that there's that trust level that let the technology do its work in terms of, you know, I might not have thought my plane ticket was changed if I didn't speak to someone live. But now I know that when I go into the Delta app, it happens. I do it through the app, and self-service is actually preferred. But I know you and I had mentioned that, like, there was a little bit of hesitation where it was like that leap of faith where to request a pickup or to change my service level, all I do is just go onto this website and just click a button, and then it's supposed to happen. But so I see you guys nodding. It's like, but once people they realize it's so easy. So we did a study where a work order created through a platform generally took like 3 minutes, and that was very conservative of going in and requesting that service versus call, email, follow up, like non-digital work order creation for a service could be 12 minutes. And when you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of requests happening nationally, this adds up to just an insane amount of time that your people on site could otherwise spend doing things that are going to help you drive your business. So I thought that was a great point. And now the other topic here has just been all over the news. The ESG phrase, ESG and sustainability. I mean, the term ESG was coined, I think, around like 2011. And then now it seems like if you pick up a newspaper, I almost guarantee in every publication you'll see something about ESG. It is so much to the forefront of business and business priorities. One of the driving factors, I think, is kind of free market of people realizing that consumers want to shop at places that align with their values and their beliefs. They want to buy the change that they want to see. So if they go in somewhere and they're like, wait, this place doesn't recycle, they have a perception about your business now. And then now more than ever, with the public can get together and start messaging about a company on Reddit, and all of a sudden that company's, you know, poor environmental practices, have a cohort of people on Reddit saying, let's get together. Did you know they did this? Brand has just become so important. So along that line, I would just love to hear how, you all are approaching, ESG within and reporting and communication within your own companies, and maybe describe a little bit more of what I saw as the progression of the importance of ESG in your own opinion.
Sure. I'd be happy to tackle that one. Cox actually released our most recent ESG report on Earth Day, so fresh in my mind from last month. And having waste be incorporated into that has been even more helpful, not only with customers, but internally, especially when a lot of corporate social responsibility reporting in the past has been very focused on carbon. It's been really exciting to see the other media, so waste and water, really be added to that and have a more holistic viewpoint of how companies are tackling environmental sustainability. So as far as that goes for Cox, it was something that we actually had previously already been reporting to the board of Cox Enterprises, and we've been really excited that there's been a push and an appetite from the public to learn more about our zero waste to landfill efforts. And so this was our second report where we actually put out a lot more information about our zero waste to landfill efforts, whereas in the past, I think the previous had been a lot more less data. And so that's really helpful in the transition to ESG, is just, there's going to be better knowledge sharing and best practice sharing like we're having right now. Folks are armed with more of sort of the zero waste talking points and data. So we have included, as far as our ESG reports, the count of our zero waste to landfill locations. So we mentioned that on the other slide, as well as the tons that we have diverted from landfill and our diversion rate. So it's really exciting for my team and also our customer relations teams. We've done many, I guess, customer insight studies, and I've been nothing but pleased to see that the demand from customers only continues to grow. And so I really am happy to see waste be part of ESG, because one of the things, Tom, that my real light bulb moment outside of optimization was the first time someone asked me, well, where do you think away is? When you throw it away, where is that? And so I think incorporating waste into ESG is getting consumers to start to think about where is away and what would zero waste even mean? So it's been exciting to be able to have a place and a platform and more of a reporting structure to start having that dialogue as we transition and grow as a community to be closer to maybe the growth path that carbon has been afforded in the last couple of years.
That's great. And Parker, how about yourself in terms of, is this something that's coming up in the healthcare space?
Absolutely. I mean, for us, for Trilogy, we really, I mean, we truly believe, and it's sometimes it's somewhat hard to believe from the outside until you're here, how invested our senior leadership is in our employee experiences. And as we continue to see, an understandable concern from a lot of our employees around this topic, that was one of our biggest reasons why we moved to start our ESG initiative. And so, and I just happened to be really fortunate to be able to bring with me some skill sets from some previous roles that really helped define how we're going to go tackle that. And so, what we did was we essentially sat down with the SASB, kind of metrics and started to line those out and say, hey, how do we, just internally, how do we measure up against these, not just in waste, but also in our electrical usage and our water usage and for a number of other things. And there's a big team here that's working on that ESG initiative, but it really goes back to us about how do we impact our employees' lives and the communities that our employees live in, and make sure that those are the best possible communities. And we just, being good stewards of resources is never the wrong decision. And so I think that for us really just, really guided our hand when we started to say, hey, this is something we want to invest resources and time to look into and make sure that we're being the best stewards we can with this resource, because they are finite and our communities will feel it. And that's where our employees live. And that's impacts us as a company.
Well, I wrote that down just for future, wording, being good stewards of resources. Such a great phrase there. So I guess the question I would kind of go from here is that oftentimes when working internally and externally, you have to always tie it to sometimes cost. Like some people, they want to know impact to the bottom line. So you alluded earlier on, Meredith, about showing some savings. In some cases, though, it does cost more to recycle, but there's that bigger picture of, are we being penny wise and pound foolish? Like, does this hurt us long term if we don't stay ahead of it? So what we communicate is that the cost of ownership is a lot different than price. So if someone comes along and they try to price out their waste and recycling operation as a pure apples to apples procurement exercise, they're missing some of the other things that are involved in that, like efficiencies from hauling reduction or diversion or time spent. If they're optimized from the way that they order the request. How do you internally differentiate and tell people that, look, it's not a pure price procurement exercise. You might think you're paying less with this person, but it ends up being more. So the question is, how do you differentiate cost of ownership, total cost of ownership versus price? And Parker, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, I'll take that one. First off, it's a great question, right? Because I think for, especially for overseeing all of our facility operations, environmental maintenance, that's an area that so often we look, to your point, apples to apples, and we say, hey, we're going to change from this vendor to this vendor, and we saw an incremental savings in price or per unit. And I think that that's just such a hard, traditionally, that's probably how we've done things, right? Because you're just kind of moving those big contracts back and forth. But I think that what's unique about Rubicon's platform is that it allows you to really get, there's much more squishiness in there because of how you can operationalize that, right? And I'm going to try to stay away from general buzzwords, but I think that there is a synergy there that doesn't exist in some of the other, in platforms or other applications when it comes to this environment, from a standpoint of how you can quickly make changes and how you can find inefficiencies. And so when you make that decision, a lot of times maybe that's made in its own a procurement silo. But once it's handed to the operations team and the operations team can really sink their teeth into it, there is such a wide breadth of capabilities that this partnership, quite frankly, with Rubicon and Trilogy brings to the table that before we didn't have. And that in itself is such a valuable piece because, maybe in the past it was just, all right, hey, that's what we've got to pay for. That's what we're going to pay for waste. And that's the end of it. You just put it away. 36 months from now, we'll revisit the RFP and see if there's an opportunity, and that's the end of that conversation. But the reality is the sites and the operations of sites, they flex so much over 36 months. They go up in occupancy, they go down, they have special events, they have holidays, they have all these different things that as they're flexing through that process, is there something that's able to flex with them? And what we have found with Rubicon is that partnership is a great partnership for us because it allows that flex and allows that total cost of ownership to be lower than just a price comparison. And so I think that's one thing that having oversight of it, and I think we'll touch on this a little bit, having oversight of it is so critical to be able to have it centralized, have it easily digestible. I've actually got the dashboard pulled up on another screen. I can look globally and say who's out of norm and why, and go, that's right, they've got a special event or they've got something going on. That's a normal check. Oh, hey, this site is not. Hey, can we just investigate what's going on there and to be able to get a quick answer? It just wasn't the case before.
Yeah, that's the way you described it. It reminds me of the case study they said when Michael Bloomberg became the mayor of New York City. Being his technology background, he came in and taking an adage out of JFK, he created the war room, he called it, which you'd go in and there was literally dashboards about every little thing about New York City and the operation that was going on. He wanted to basically see what was going on so he could make what he called data-driven decisions. So like, we don't just do things anecdotally off of feeling. We do things after like, show me the data. So that's a great point you made there. And now, wow, time flies when you're having fun. I guess I sound like a cheese ball, but it certainly does. I look down at my clock and I see it's already 12:45. So it's time to kind of run through some of these great questions that have been coming in as I just keep them coming through more and more. So we'll start sort of at the first, which actually was one from Andrea Wilcox about Cox, and Meredith gives you a very great compliment here. They said they had no idea Cox had such amazing sustainability goals, and you truly are not guilty of greenwashing. You're really making an impact. So congratulations, Meredith, and thank you, Andrea, for the nice words. But along that, she said, do you have any lessons learned from your plan engaging communities, vendors, suppliers outside of your walls? So external people, like being that you've accomplished such greatness, like what's the biggest thing you would tell Andrea as things learned?
I would say the biggest lesson learned, and we employ this within our four walls and outside, is meeting people where they are. Waste, one of the things that makes waste so fun, but I think makes people passionate about it, is it's something they can hold in their hand and think about. But given that we are working with communities all over the country, it's really important to understand what their journey has been, what are their pain points, and what can we work on together, and not just come in and saying, well, here's what I think it should be. So I would say first and foremost, meeting people where they are, whether that's your internal customer or your external customer, and understanding what their needs are. And so for us, that goes upstream for our suppliers as well. What are you looking to solve? Here's what we're trying to look to solve. Can we move forward? And then one thing that you said, Tom, earlier would have been my second piece of advice is celebrate early wins. I'm not ashamed to say that I haven't done this perfectly, certainly building a program from nothing. And one of the things that I would change doing this again is setting up a framework to allow people to achieve wins early. Zero waste is a very lofty goal, and it's all or nothing. And that is not something that keeps people motivated, just as when we're talking about the optimizations. Our strategy is always, so whether they're community partners, supplier partners, let's be sure that we have ways for folks to celebrate success, because realistically, and I think Parker and Tom and I are all on the same page, that a lot of waste for optimizations is behavior change. And so you need folks buy-in, and it's a lot of social capital for them to work on something like this. So be sure you set them up for success so that they can talk about their work, talk about your partnership. And again, I hate to keep using the word evangelize, but talk to other communities, talk to your other suppliers, and talk to your other partners. If you leave them in the wind for 3 years with nothing to say, but they've been toiling away and making progress, but they haven't achieved this milestone that's all the way up here, you're not going to, gain a lot of traction moving forward.
Yeah, the early wins, and by securing early wins, it's also an opportunity to educate everyone on the importance. I mean, our CEO Nate Morris always says it's the invisible problem. Like, trash just gets whisked away, and you don't think about it, and you don't even realize how much is being produced. And then you start looking at some stats, and it's, Americans produce 4 times as much waste per year than they did in the 1980s. Like, we are trending in a consumerism society. Like, we are producing more and more waste, and it's something we need to think about because it's our legacy. So getting people to realize that this is a real problem. It's not the invisible thing that just gets taken care of. Like, that actually goes and stays somewhere forever. So that's a great point. And here's the Ryan Cooper from our circular economy team he'd be all over this question, because it's about food recycling, from Richard Ims. And he's just interested in, what are you doing towards diverting food waste from the landfill? Ryan calls it the icky factor. It's sometimes it's something people don't want to touch that. They don't want to get into to compost or upcycling food. But how do you approach it? So I'll start with you, Parker.
Yeah, so every one of our campuses has a full dining facility on site. And so that's definitely something we have already started to investigate. Learn about this on a Rubicon panel a few months ago about what Rubicon's doing in this environment. And there's some fundamental structures that need to be fixed to really kind of get composting accessible. And I think that's been where it's going to be a neat partnership between municipalities recognizing that there's an opportunity there and how to manage it, businesses recognizing there's an opportunity, and service providers that connect those two and the ability to connect. And I think that the structure's there. I think we quite frankly, just need to put nose to grindstone and kind of continue to work at it. It's a huge opportunity. And I think that that's something we're going to continue to look at and try to figure out how do we find a crack and go for it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think a lot of that infrastructure is being developed. There's been a lot of investment into that space to make it something we can scale and actually not make it be an anomaly when someone does composting, but make it be the normal.
Right. Absolutely.
Meredith, any lessons learned in the food waste journey?
Sure. So we also have composting programs, and we really like composting because when we tackle zero waste, we're really interested in things that are heavy. So food waste is actually, it's got a lot of water in it, so really helps us make progress towards our zero waste to landfill goal. So again, getting that buy-in from our employees on launching a composting program is maybe going to be hard. To Parker's point, you know, it's got to be right, it's got to be consistent, but here's some of the benefit. One of the things that we've heard is our employees are demanding composting. And this shift to working from home has really accelerated our focus on turning our gaze outward into our communities, because exactly what Parker was saying, the infrastructure isn't quite there. And so Cox is really trying to figure out how can we help be a catalyst for that, because what we're hearing from employees is, I was able to compost when I was at the office, but now that I'm at home, I'm not able to do that. And they are demanding from my team, how are you going to be a part of this solution? How are you going to, you know, be a part of not only empowering composting at Cox, but really helping others have access to composting? So it is, I hear Ryan on the icky factor, but I tell you what, Cox employees, when we surveyed them, asking them about what resonates with them when they think about their zero waste journey, the number one thing is composting. So we are actively looking to see how we can launch more programs, how can we be a part of the solution.
Yeah, and the demand is high, and the compliance is there as well with, you know, what's happening in California with it. You know, I think going through the pandemic, some of those regulations weren't as strictly enforced, but we're already hearing about boots on the ground checking out site visits to ensure compliance. So that is happening. And that was a very interesting point about the employees wanting it. Because as a B Corp, we always are thinking about, what do our employees want? Like, what are they saying? And they talk about like the war on talent, like getting good employees and retaining great employees. And I think it's a very real thing. And people are choosing to work at the companies that, you know, if they work at a company that, what do you mean we don't compost here? Like, I want to work for a company that composts. It starts to be that people care more about that stuff than they are about, like, you know, things 20 years ago that they used to care about. So that is a very important thing. Perception is so critical for your own employees and your customers. So this was, and perhaps this is a great ending question, because it ties it all together. You know, optimization allows doing the most with limited resources and in a specific situation. A lot of times we can optimize in order, you know, maybe composting could not be economically feasible, but if you're optimized, it becomes economically feasible. So the optimization is almost a means of being able to fund the diversion. So they're one-on-one. But this question that came in from PD Insurance was, how do you, in a situation where perhaps the data or the dollars don't back up exactly what you're trying to report on an ESG initiative, but you know it's still important and it's not a specifically measurable data point, how do you position that internally if it does not have the visible outcome or data to support the initiative in the short term? So Parker, getting people to think big picture, how do you...
Yeah, I'll give my answer. I think, you know, I'm gonna guess, but I think Meredith's probably got a much more mature answer, right? So for us as a company, right, it really starts with making sure you have stakeholder alignment. I mean, that is so critical, and I think that that's where so many of these ESG initiatives stumble and trip, is there's not a true stakeholder alignment from senior leadership all the way through the organization to execute, you know, program managers and the ones who are putting those, you know, structures together all the way to the site from an operational perspective. If that alignment isn't happening, there needs to be a reset before you're tackling. And to your point, and we've had these conversations with senior leadership to say, hey, look, we're going to go after this and we're going to try to start diverting. It may not come out in a financial savings, but to your point, Tom, and I think that this is what we're finding already is, from an optimization standpoint and the levers and the pulleys and the dials that we now have at the sites to be able to manage this, we can start to find that in time. But it may not be, it's not always going to be a quick win and you put a recycling dumpster outside, and boom, we saved $100,000 per site. Like, it's just not, that's not how it works. You know, and I think that has to be a conversation with stakeholders early on to say, hey, look, we can go down this path. We may not see an immediate savings, but we're going to create new levers and abilities to manage this piece of the business that we didn't have before, that's going to create long-term value. And to your point before, I mean, you talk about labor shortages. There's not a person on this call that isn't dealing with labor shortage in some capacity, right? And so if you're really going to say,
no, I'm kidding.
I can promise you,
great to hear. It's so true.
Yeah, and so to your point, if that's truly something that that your organization is bought into, it will show through with your actions. And that's such a great way to start that. So, and that's coming from an organization that's a year into its ESG initiative. And I know Meredith so I'll give it to Meredith because I think it is a great question to end the conversation on.
I mean, Parker, you hit all the nails on the head. I was just going to give an example of this is for us would be styrofoam, right? It doesn't really weigh a lot. It's not going to move. It's not going to optimize the trash service. So, but it again is high social capital for our locations that are undergoing that. So it's really important to look at that picture and then make sure, to Parker's point about the alignment, we try to pair those together and deliver that story to their leadership, tying that in with the optimization. Oh, and we did this other thing. So making sure that when they do things that don't move the needle on the diversion rate, we make sure that it is heavily broadcast to their leadership. And you know what? That's what resonates with their leadership. They understand eliminating styrofoam cups. They don't even always necessarily understand when we're talking about, oh, well, you moved 3 points on your diversion rate. So I would actually argue that it's really important to have both sides of that coin, because some of those ones that maybe don't move the needle as much, that's your storytelling. And that's the storytelling that a leader, that your leadership has buy-in, that's what they can tell to other leaders. They can articulate that win to other people.
I love that. It's like you manage the expectation for the things that are more bigger picture, that are a story. Instead of a data-driven answer, it's a story-driven, big picture answer. And it's just managing both of them at the right, I guess, the right level to find balance. But, well, I want to thank you both for leading this with us. I mean, we know this is one of the greatest existential crises that we're facing as a society, and you all out at these companies are pushing the needle on that and are leading the charge. So I'm super grateful that you guys gave up the time from your busy schedule to join us. So thank you from all of us at Rubicon, and thank you to everyone who joined from the audience. And we're here for any questions people have to us. Our contact information will be distributed, or mine will. Don't worry. If we need to put you in touch with Meredith or Parker, we'll maybe ask to facilitate that conversation, or you all can reach out on LinkedIn or the various avenues. But we are very, very grateful. So Parker and Meredith, I'll leave you with the last words here. If there's anything you want to add in the closing minute.
No, Tom, I just really appreciate you guys having me on, and we're happy to share what Trilogy is doing to help out on this. And quite frankly, it was great to hear from Meredith and just kind of see the trajectory that some of these programs can have and sticking with it. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having us on and talking about Cox. And I applaud you for gathering a group like this. I actually think this is a really exciting opportunity. There aren't a lot of platforms for folks that are interested in talking trash to get together and learn from each other. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.